And that's literally how they built Washington, D.C. So if you have Constitution Avenue, you're on the Equinox line. And if you go down, that one is on the Equinox line. And
Oh.
they line up at a certain time of year with
Mhm.
this heavenly alignment. And from there, I realized that Washington, D.C. has been set up as a temple.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of All Things in One, reuniting religion with the woman in the wilderness. And today I have my lovely friend Robin Young. And Robin and I met, interestingly enough, at the Journal for Mormon Polygamy conference that we were both
Yeah,
attending,
that's
right?
true.
We had
Yeah.
some mutual friends and we just hit it off right away. Robin is so knowledgeable. She's so fun to chat with. And we've hung out since then multiple times and are kind of soul sisters in the work that we're doing. So,
Yeah.
Robin, why don't you just tell our audience a little bit about what you do and how you ended up doing that?
Okay. Well, I've always been a kind of a study of scriptures and religion, and also other areas, other philosophies or mysteries or whatever you want to call them. And so I've taught in like religious things. But when I moved to Utah in 2013, and a story had really captured my mind. I had been working with Avraham Gileadi, and because I found that the book of Isaiah seemed to be a black box, right? I couldn't crack the code. And this guy had written all these books on it. So I ended up helping him out and kind of becoming his assistant sort of thing, helping with the books and his conferences and things. And anyway, studying with him. And so I did that for, several years. And then I found a book that was on Joseph and Asenath, and for some reason that really captured my attention. I just couldn't put it away. And I showed it to him because he had taught me that in Isaiah that there are code words, there's layers, that the way that the prophets of old taught was that there was your frontline story that we take and we're like, okay, it was the ark and animals and that. But then there's also these key words that link that story to other stories and a deeper meaning. And there's also words that are symbolic because that's the way that Christ taught, using parables or symbolic stories. So that started to open my mind and understand that really our existence on this earth is not just about being a good girl or boy, but it's really about trying to ascend back into the presence of God. And that's a difference than what we had been taught, in basic church. So when I found this story and I was just enamored with it, then I showed it to him and he said, "Oh, that's just a love story." And I'm like, "No, it has these key words, these trap doors, these multiple layers." And so we went to lunch and I showed it to him and he's like, "Oh my goodness, I think you're right." So I would study that book for years and it's so tiny. It's like 22 pages, but it's like it's like Isaiah. It's only 66 chapters, but there's so much there. Anyway, from that, I would go and work with a retired professor, Dr. Hall, and I would take classes with him because he did the Egyptian and kind of more ancient, the Greek, and he had a different take. And because the story of Joseph and his son takes place in Egypt, that would take me there. Then I became really interested and fascinated with temples, and this will tie into what we're doing today.
Yeah.
But the ancient temples, it appears that this same creation story happens all over the world. It's not just in one location. And that story is telling us, and a lot of times we see that there's a big problem in Adam and Eve and that whole story and how they're cast out of the garden. But what I found and what the ancient scribes said is in the problem is the solution. So that ends up being really remarkable. And so what I'll end up doing is I will end up going to Egypt. I will go to some of these places. I would go to these ancient temples like in Peru and Machu Picchu and find that they have similar elements. And pretty soon I'm pretty good now at breaking down all of those elements. And then I literally I was in England and I was finding stuff that it's like they shouldn't have had this information at this time. How could they have had it? And what I did is I found it, this kind of crazy stuff about washings and anointings and all of this kind of temple symbolism in this octagon room in 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 a cathedral. And I was like, what is going on here? So I came back and on a random thing, I just thought, I'll look up octagons. Like, what's with octagons? An eight-sided building can't be that important. And that would take me to Washington, D.C.,
Hmm.
and I would find something called the Octagon House. And from there, I realized that Washington, D.C. has been set up as a temple. And I was like, whoa, we go from Adam and Eve and what that whole garden scenario is a temple and it's a template. So as they are getting kicked out of the temple, that is our decline or our descent, right? We're at creation, we're put in the garden, something happens with the tree and the tree of the good and evil fruit. We're kicked out of the garden, then we're in this world. This world is our maze. We're trying to figure out, who we are and what's our purpose and what's life all about. And when you find Christ and you find righteousness and you find repentance, and He's the way, but He's not. A lot of times people think Christ is the end, but He's pointing us to something else. He is the way, but He is pointing us back to the garden, back to our heavenly parents. And you'll find out what we lost was the Heavenly Mother. And so she's so key in helping us restore the rest of the story. She's kind of the secret that has not been seen. And when we find her, this story of, I mean, literally, it's so crazy. It goes from Adam and Eve, the fall, and all these temples that you find all over the world that people spent how many hours and time and everything building. Why did they spend so much time to do these mammoth, like the pyramids or top of mountains? And why do they do that? And it has something about temples and ascending back to the presence of the Lord. So, and the kingdom of heaven. So that's kind of where my research was. And I've been a hermit for a long time, like as far as just study. And so it's been more recently that I've started to share some of this information and this has been my little area that I love so much. So and then I ended up coming over to your house and doing a presentation really on kind of why this restoration is so important because literally the woman comes back. We go from Genesis, the garden story, and we end up with the book of Revelations. And it's how you conquer that demon, the devil, Satan, the serpent, whatever you want to call him. And not only does Christ help us conquer, but so does the woman and her children that have a testimony of Jesus Christ. So she is this big power player that we had no idea that we're her daughters and
Yeah.
that's part of our journey.
Yeah, it's sort of the twist ending to the
Yeah.
story, right? That you don't expect. And some of what you said is absolutely in my book, right? It's like if Christ is the way, if he's the keeper of the gate, what's on the other side of the gate?
Yes.
Right? Like to
Yeah.
whom and to what is he leading us? And linguistically, it's interesting because, our mutual friend Jared, he's been doing presentations at my home,
Yeah.
and he shows that it is the mother. And not just him, others, Margaret Barker and others have shown like she is the goal. Like that is the goal for various reasons that are hard to explain if you don't really understand the purpose of the divine feminine, the power of what she does for us and how she is the ascension. Like she is so integral to that power and that ability to bring heaven and earth together where mortal human beings can commune with perfect, immortal beings. She is that vessel, I would say, that womb space, that holy of holies in which that takes place. Anyway, there's a lot of ways to go about talking about that, but I would love sometime to be able just to travel the world with you and because you have these eyes to see, right? You have this vision, which is very much a divine feminine thing, those visionary eyes, right? And you've been given it to see. And something that I love that another mutual friend of ours, Mandy Green, says is, right, if you're looking at something and like you pull on a thread and it just comes right out, maybe there's nothing there. But if you pull on a thread and it's connected to more and you keep pulling and more
Yeah,
comes out and more comes out, right?
so true.
And that's what you and I do. I feel is like we're pulling on these threads and you're connecting it to this, to that, to this, and you're seeing all these connections. Just like same thing for me. The study of Isaiah opened my eyes in a similar way. And now we make all these connections. And so now you've gathered all this information and you share it. You have a platform now where you
Hmm.
do share some things, right? Do you want
Yeah.
to tell us the name of that?
Yeah, so my website is seeherclearly.com.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. And what I've done recently is I put together kind of a series of 4 classes because this information, you can end up with just libraries of as you're looking for all the pieces. And so what I figured out is if we want to be able to share this information in a quick way for people to really have a comprehensive grasp on it. And so here are the 4 classes. I said, if the heavenly woman exists, we should be able to find her in scripture. And so the first class is there a woman here? Can we find her? And that's what first class is. The second
Sorry, it's just
one,
funny because like that question just goes to the heart of this. It's like, is there a woman here? Yes, we've been here the whole time. We're 50% of the
yes,
population. It's just you don't see it. You don't
yeah,
see us for some
yeah,
reason, but we're
Eve,
here.
the mother of all living, named after her heavenly mother, right? Made in
Hmm.
the image of God. And that's where Jared and other Hebraic scholars, that Elohim is a plural. And
Yeah.
it's a mother, a father, and children. I mean, it's the whole heavenly host.
Yeah.
So when you take her out, that's part of they say in some of the mythology is that man is blind in one eye, and the eye that he's blind in is he can't see the woman.
Hmm.
It's so
Yeah.
amazing.
Probably the
So
left eye, like the left
yeah,
eye of
that's the
Horus,
left
right?
eye. So the first one is she there? How can I find her? The second one I just did last night. I'll get that recording up pretty soon. But it's her names, her signs, and her symbols. So
Mm.
just like Christ has names, signs, and symbols, Lord of Lord, King of Kings. I mean, I have a girlfriend, she found 400. But when you think he's the Lamb of God, he's just all of these things. You think of the cross, the lamb, all of these symbols that are his. Does she have these? Because when we find those,
Hmm.
it really opens our eyes to her attributes and her titles and
Yeah.
and what she does for us and all of the elements that we as her daughters want to aspire to have those same attributes. Sometimes Christ speaks as the father, and sometimes he speaks as the mother because he's being the spokesperson. So when he says, as a hen gathereth her chicks, that's a very feminine
Hmm.
concept. But he's saying, you've tried, I've tried to gather you for so long and you won't do it. And so it's almost the woman's voice. So you find her, and I ended up, Margaret Barker has like 36 names, and then there's another hymn from the 400 AD, so very close to the time of Christ, where those names actually match some of the lead plates that Margaret Barker has deciphered, right? And so of those names, she was kind of amazed that they matched the same names that were given to Mary in this very early hymn.
Yeah. And
So
for
the
people who
menorah,
don't know, these lead plates were discovered in Jordan not too long ago. People thought that
yeah,
they were a fraud, but now Margaret Barker has decoded them, kind of similar to how Abraham Gilead has decoded Isaiah in a sense. It's really similar, in fact, because it seems to come from the school of Isaiah, is what she has determined.
yeah.
And basically it's all divine feminine. It's like all the mother, all Mary, like all that. So anyway, but and then you have one other class, right?
Yeah, and so that's the second one. The third
Oh,
one is the path of transformation, and that's really for the women. That's what after Christ was resurrected, he gave to Mary and he told her, what do the women need to do to get out of their anger or their victimhood or their, all of the things we carry that stop us from receiving that pure revelation and that direction in our lives. And so then the fourth one is on revelation. And
Yes.
then I'm going to be having another one on relationships because in it, everything affects relationships.
Oh, that is so perfect. I mean, the things that you cover are the things that I felt inspired to cover in my book as well, and in a different way. It
Awesome.
follows kind of like a hero's journey in a sense, you know. But you get the tools, and then you go in and you go into the belly of the well, you go into the darkness, you explore that, and then you come back with these gifts, right? These
Yeah.
spiritual gifts, which are really important. But and there's like a billion things that you and I could talk about, and I know we could go on like
Yeah.
for days and days. But I want to focus this conversation today for our audience on the founding of America
Hmm.
and right and all this divine feminine and maybe answer that question that you posed at the beginning of this was just why would they even bother to do that. So if you could just give us a little background, and I know you've got some slides to share, and then we'll get into that. But why would the founding fathers even bother to do, like, why are they putting these symbols and these secret things in Washington D.C. in the first place? Why do that?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to why was why was
That's such a
I
broad question, I know.
well, it's a battle between good and evil.
Hmm.
And what you find is the good has to do with righteousness, rightness, moral behavior, and the evil has to do with iniquity, immoral behavior. And when you think of women being used as a bride or being used as a whore, right? It's the perspective of the man on how he looks at this. So what happens is the same thing that happened. Why was Isaiah, why were some of these priests stoned and kicked out of Jerusalem? Why did Christ come back and call them, the Pharisees and the Sadducees vipers? And, I mean, he's like condemning them to hell. And what are they doing? Well, what had they done? They had kicked out the mother. And when you look at the stories of Jesus Christ and all of the things that they were doing, they had so discredited the woman, right? She couldn't go into the temple when there were temple priestesses before. I mean, they went into the temple, there were prophetesses
Hmm.
before, but when they get rid of the woman, they just clean house. And she ends up being more like the slave, the unclean thing. You can't talk to her, you can't touch her, you can't heal her, you can't raise Darius's daughter from the dead. Like all of those things that Christ totally ignores. So he's teaching something different, and he always refers to it as the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God. And those are, he talks to him, the apostles say, why do you teach like this? And in all of these coded words, and he said, well, for you, who he had just taken up onto the mountain or into the
Hmm.
mountain, he said, it's to know these things. But for them, it's not. They weren't ready. Their minds are darkened. So you have to kind of clean up your stuff to receive more. But the mysteries of the kingdom, it's really a kingdom doesn't exist without a queen,
Hmm.
and a kingdom doesn't exist without children.
Yeah.
So the feminine side of that is kept protected. And that happens when after he's killed, then the story is, right? His mother, Mary Magdalene, Mary Salome, they go to Egypt, they go into southern France, and what you find is there is a different story being perpetrated. They're the basics of the apostles, but a lot of the early teachings will get taken out as the Bible is being put back together.
Hmm.
So a lot of our apocrypha has to do with the mysteries or the mother or the woman because they are just making themselves be the king, the person that you go to. So just how Christ, I hope I'm not babbling too much, but how Christ, he's chastising the priests and Pharisees because he's like, you're stopping them from going to the kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
You are the block, and they need to get in to the temple because then they would understand the covenant of marriage, the covenant of union, and the ability to receive revelation. And the woman is so much a part of that, right? She's the tree of life. She brings life in, but she's also the Shekinah, that light channel through which like Isaiah and Moses and Abraham
Mhm.
and John have revelation. So Margaret Barker's argued that all of those visionary experiences are happening in the temple, in the holy place, or in something that is similar to the holy place. They've
Right.
done what's necessary.
Yeah, and
So,
just sorry, just to interject really quick so people kind of understand when Jesus goes up on the mount, right? This is a temple ascension experience, the mountain of the Lord. I mean,
yeah,
hopefully if people have read my book, they know that. But something else that Margaret Barker's pointed out is he as he goes through this process, at the beginning and ending, there's this chiasmus I talked about, right? And it's that the promise given to the poor and also those who are persecuted is theirs is the kingdom of heaven, Basileia, right? But if you change the inflection, Basilia, it becomes theirs is the queen of heaven. So she is
yeah,
quite literally the goal. Okay, so sorry, I just wanted to interject that. So you go ahead. So they're kind of taking
so
her
good.
out, right? This is a
Yes,
problem, and that removes the power of the whole point of having a temple, of having a religion, that
yeah.
Shekinah.
And so what happens is this information is kept, but it's kept secretly, and it will eventually go and they're so smart that they leave you cookie crumbs through history that you can find all of these crumbs because they don't want you to totally lose her. And those that are they know these things, they will find it. Like she's called the Rose. So in Chartres Cathedral, it's the Rose window.
Mhm.
And it has so much. It's Notre Dame is Our Lady.
Yeah.
So it's built to Our Lady. And that's so they're pointing these things that the builders are literally putting in stone for you to find as it resonates with your soul because your spirit came from a heavenly place. You have knowledge. And when you find that truth, it just kind of touches you.
Yeah.
So that's why these interesting things, that's why you're talking about pulling on a thread. It's like, oh, there's more there. There's more there. And that's really how you find it. But it ends up going literally around Europe and over into England and Scotland. And eventually the founders had, I would say they probably had mothers and fathers that had this knowledge, this ancient knowledge, and they knew that there would come a time in the end times when this information needed to come out. So they do it in New York. They kind of set up a lot of the things like even what is it? Fifth Avenue goes right along Central Park. Central Park is kind of made as a garden-esque type thing. And at the end of Central Park, there is a mountain of the Lord. It's if you've ever been to the Met, I always thought there was only one Metropolitan Museum of New York. There's a second Met, and it's on that mountain, and it's fascinating. They have so many clues in there. It's called the Cloisters, and whoa, tell you
Oh, yeah.
wonderful things there. But then they go to DC and they map it out and they map it out. So like ancient temples, they always have the door should be to the east and the setting to the west. So you think of east of Eden and then you're moving to the west. And then you're going back into the temple, partaking of that fruit and having this visionary and this understanding. So temples all over the world are sent not only on earth, but they're set because this earth is like the footstool. It's your challenge, right? Your school, but it's set within the stars. So they set up a temple. So it is a mirror to the heavenly. It's like a template or a map of the heavens. So you have as above, so below.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. I just wanted to take a second and invite you to check out the links in the show notes and comments below this video to my new book, All Things in One: Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness, where we explore questions like, does deep diving into deep doctrine mean going off the deep end and losing my faith, friends, and family? Why does the Book of Mormon mention so few women? Why do members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe in a Heavenly Mother yet know so little about her? And what does all this have to do with the Latter-day Zion? All Things in One Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness is a quest for the divine feminine that leads us through the murky terrain of time, folklore, apocryphal texts, and the words of prophets, ancient and modern, to discover how men and women can work together to gather all truth in one in Christ and be reunited with both a mother and a father in heaven. Get yourself or a loved one a copy of All Things in One Reuniting Religion with the Woman in the Wilderness on Amazon Kindle and Audible.
And that's literally how they built Washington, D.C. So if you have Constitution Avenue, you're on the Equinox line. And if you go down, what's the other one? Goes in front of the White House. I can't think of the name of it right now. But that one is on the Equinox line. And
Oh,
they line up at a certain time of year with
mm-hmm.
this heavenly alignment. Because when you're living in accordance to God's laws,
Yeah.
you have power. And so even our Declaration of Independence, which says you must first, that you really, it's three things that you need to defend is life. That's the woman. That's the life giver. You protect life above all else. One of the girls said, "Oh, is that why the Titanic, they let the women off first?" It's like, yeah, that's what chivalry will protect the women. And then the next thing is liberty, their agency. They have to have freedom of mind and conscience to think. And the last one's your pursuit of happiness. If we really understand who we are and what's our purpose,
Mhm.
then we fulfill that purpose, and that is your happiness, right? Your pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
So those are your three, and then having one nation under God is almost like a motto for Zion. That is the goal. And so we'll see that the Holy of Holies was built in a perfect cube, and Washington, D.C. literally was built in a 10-mile by 10-mile cube. So those are the proportions. And
Yeah.
it's built between Mary's land and Virginia, or the
Yeah.
Virgin's land, right? You see those two female states named right there. And it's the District of Columbia, which is the dove, which
Do,
is the
and
symbol.
do you have that on slides for us to see?
Yeah, maybe
Is
I could
that
show part
what?
of that. Let's see if we can
Okay.
get it up here.
And yeah, that was going to be my question. You kind of answered it. It's like, was their intention to build Zion? And I
Yeah,
think it was. And in my book, the reason why I was so excited to have this conversation with you in particular, Robin, is because I go through the history of how they're pulling out the divine feminine. They're getting rid of her. They're getting rid of the mother. And then just, you can't help but then marginalize women when you do that. So
that's
women
right.
become more and more marginalized in Christianity until you get to the Age of Enlightenment. And I explored the dark side of the Age of Enlightenment. Like, it's not all as great as we think it is. It actually sent us into this age of materialism, which marginalized the divine feminine even further. We just cut
Yeah,
ourselves off from her. But the bright light in that is there were these founding fathers, there were these people who understood and tried to, I would say, graft her back in the founding of America. They did try to establish the woman Zion in various ways. They understood that that was important. So even as we're going through this age of like greater separation, there are those who are striving to bring that light back in, and that's so I want you to show us the good side of this.
yeah. The
So
good
yeah, if
side
you
of the Enlightenment, part of that was they get some ancient records, and from those records, they realize, like the church at that time, the Catholic Church had become so overbearing, right? And you're a slave, you're always evil, you're bad, your body's bad. They would
Mhm.
beat themselves, they would just horrible things. But one of the things that they learned in the Enlightenment is if you are made in the image of God, you must have a spark of godness in you. And so this his guy's Pico della Mirando. His name's super long Italian name, but he came up and he said, I will argue, I will go in front of all the priests. You put any priest in front of me, and he argues for the dignity of man. That
Mhm.
man has something so valuable within him that you cannot be lords, and that's really Satan's thing is to always lord over.
Mhm.
And you see how through kings or churches has have kept people in their place, very much like the Pharisees and Sadducees that Christ was condemning. But they also do that by eliminating the woman and keeping her sometimes uneducated, all of the rest of these horrible things. But where I'll show you is, so in that darkness, there's always been a little beacon of light, but they have to hide it or literally they get killed.
Yes. Okay, so show us what's hidden. Open it
Okay, let me
and
see if I can
unveil
get.
it before our minds.
Okay, so this would take too long to go through entirely, but
Yeah.
basically, it's America in prophecy and to fulfill her promise as Zion. So the founding fathers, they knew because they could see through the past and through the history that this information had literally gone from Egypt, where the written record starts, where we find the first temples. It will go into Judea with Moses and the tabernacle and Solomon and his temple. But then after they get kicked out, they destroy the temple, they kick out the woman, and so those temples afterwards are fallen temples. Well, then the information will go, and let me see if I can get to that picture for you. Okay, so here's DC, and you can see how it looks like a land of temples, right? These look like Greek or Roman temples. But one of the stories really is how you want to bring heaven and earth together. So heaven represents a circle and the earth represents a square. So a lot of times you'll think of a compass that makes the circle or the boundary of the temple, and then the earth as being the square. So literally, our capital is made as a dome, the circle of heaven on the square foundation, bringing heaven and earth together. And on top of this dome is a woman, and her name is Freedom. So she's not looking, if you know Washington, D.C., there's a mall in the middle of it with all the Smithsonians around it. And then at the far end of the Capitol is the Lincoln Memorial. Lincoln Memorial is on the back of the penny. You know, it's Lincoln sitting inside that kind of rectangular temple. And on the equinox, but you would think they would have Freedom looking down the mall, but she's reversed. She's looking over a parking lot. She's looking to the east.
Yeah.
She's looking for the rising sun. She's looking for the return of Jesus Christ. And as he comes in the east and then sets perfectly in the equinox, exactly right behind the Temple of Freedom. Literally, Lincoln's monument is called, and it's inscribed on it, the Temple of Freedom. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So there you can see just from that and that they were very conscious of what they're representing. And on all of these little friezes up there, you can see in the cornice, there's stories that are being told. You'll find some with the woman and the tree of life right behind her. And always you're either you really the tale, how you know is if you're going towards life and morality, you're going good. If you're going towards death and immorality, iniquity, you're going towards bad. And so they literally would make squares on the ground. A lot of the buildings have a black and white or a checkerboard looking thing. And the concept is every step you're taking is either towards light or towards darkness. Every thought you're making is a conscious decision towards light or darkness. So very sophisticated information. Even all of these columns, they have representations of what they are. These columns, and they go all the way back, but the columns have meanings. And these columns that you see with the it's the acantha leaf or the yeah acantha. Anyway, at the very top, that if you can see those are representing trees of life.
Hmm.
And when Christ in Revelations to John, he says, if you follow me, I will make you a pillar in the temple of God, and you will have your tree of life, which is his wife, right? So it's the idea of creation is the man cannot get there without the woman. However, the woman can get there without the man, which is very interesting. But there's a problem that the man has to overcome. And the women are going to have to go through their stuff too, but that's kind of fascinating. Big,
Well,
deep
that
thing.
that speaks to actually another theme in my book, the idea of ladies first. that we
Yeah.
often don't recognize that we see this hero's journey mythologically, and Joseph Campbell said, "Oh, there isn't really a heroine's journey because she's the place that the men are trying to get to. She's already there. She just needs to wake up and realize that."
Yeah.
But the thing that I speak to in my book is that's true, but the reason why she's already there is because she already made the descent. And we have patterns for that all throughout scripture. Eve
Yeah.
made that descent before Adam, and she arose. Like you said, she was already there. She could partake of the fruit. He couldn't, but she could. She had the
Yeah.
power to do that. And he had to awake and arise to meet her where she was. Right.
Yes.
And so, yeah, so that's just so beautiful. I wanted to throw that in there. But what's
Yeah. So
next? Yeah.
we're on the same one. So a lot of this comes back to the power of marriage because the
Mm.
man, if he stays single, he will be a lost man in the wilderness. And it's the marriage you can see as she holds her bouquet, she is as a tree of life. Her bouquet is her fruit. Her veil
Oh,
is
yeah.
her veil of holiness. She
Yes.
is in the Holy of Holies.
Yeah.
So he's wearing, a man can either wear, traditionally a suit, but if he's in the military, he can wear his military attire because he's supposed to be this chivalrous protector of his children and his wife. Like he's got the strength to protect. And how often we've had the opposite happen, which is the great, which step are you going towards light or dark? So that's one of them.
Oh, that's great. I never thought of the bouquet that way before as being the tree of life. That's such a beautiful thread.
Isn't that her
Yeah.
fruit? She's promising. And her, the reason Diana had that very, very, if you remember back, or you think of Kate Middleton in the marriage, these royal weddings, they have outrageously long trains, is the train represents all the generations that will come after you. So
Wow.
they want in kingship, right? You want a really long generation. So I think when Lady Di got married, to now King Charles, but hers went down almost the entire length of the cathedral. It was outrageously long. So it's super fun.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's in Isaiah when the opening of Isaiah. I want to say that one of the words in there where God comes in, it's like a mist in the Holy of Holies where Isaiah sees God. It says the train of God, like God's robe filled the temple. And so I see train, yeah, as being related to that as well.
Yeah, you can see the train, a lot of people when they have these visionary, they'll see the throne of God and then they see him encircled by light or by angels, right? It's the heavenly hosts, it's the children of heaven. So in the prophets, they've always been talking about there will eventually be a restoration of all things. Well, one of the things that needs to be restored is the woman.
Yeah.
That's the restoration of all things. And this restoration has to happen, and it precedes the millennium. And so when this restoration starts to happen in Joel, Peter even quotes it as all of a sudden people are speaking in tongues and there's healings and all these things go on, all these gifts of the Spirit. And in Joel, when he's talking about the restoration, he says, "Your your sons and daughters will have visions, and they will what is it? It's visions
And
and
dreams.
language and dream dreams."
Yeah.
I don't have it right here on me, but that's the restoration that happens is we really open up that conduit for these heavenly blessings to be poured out upon those that are keeping this righteousness and are keeping that bond. And the women are the leaders in bringing this information forward. And that's kind of amazing because the heavenly woman will be unveiled. And the founding fathers literally knew she had to be unveiled. So we talk about her identity and purpose being kind of erased. I mean, she's erased out of the scriptures. The priests of prior to Jesus Christ had erased her, and then Jesus Christ is restoring her, but he's not telling everyone about the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, right? There are people that they're so lost and broken, they're going to have to be brought into Christ and his message of salvation, and that you're sons and daughters of God, and that there's a way of repenting. There's always a way of cleaning up whatever mess you have. You can always get out of your sins and can go out of that iniquities into righteousness, rightness. We even think of the Statue of Liberty holding she's the one that holds the scales of justice. And what is just and true? Well, it's that moral, just and true. It's a behavior. And if people think that it's just, they leave out the woman, they leave out the rape or the abuse or the horrible things that have been done to women in society, and think that they've been honest in their dealings. It's like, well, what's your relationship like with
Hmm.
your wife? What's your relationship? That is, and I think we've had prophets say that. Like when you go before the Lord, it's not going to be like, what was your job and what did you
Yeah.
do? It was, how did you take care of your wife and your children? Wow. Is that the focus of most men? Of good men, it is, but many men, it's not. And so we see kind of the carnage of that kind of thinking, where the woman has been put on a lesser scale. So anyway, the woman has to be found and then restored. I love this picture. This is a William Blake picture, and here is a picture of Eve. And it shows that the woman has been hidden not only in churches, but in state. So you can see the woman in the middle. She has her two daughters on either side of her. She's in this kind of this pillar of light, the clouds that are reminiscent of the Shekinah, or this visionary state, because you can see the angel is literally talking to her, pointing up, say, let's look up here. And she's so strong and muscular, she's powerful, but she's looking to the woman that's veiled. This is the heavenly woman that's veiled. And you can see down at the bottom, there's a church with a cross. It might be yeah, I think it's a church. And then over to the right, you could see maybe a cathedral or office buildings in the over in Europe, over in England. That's where he would have been painting. So the church and state are in darkness because have they taken care of the bride? Have they taken care of the woman? And I think in the church, you see that no, she's not been brought out of the darkness yet. And with the state, if they really, I always think of with Visa, they can find out if you didn't pay $1, right? Or your interest, or the IRS, they can tax and track every dollar. But do they really track the horrific sins that have been perpetrated on women and children and sex predatory type things that have so degraded the woman? No. Do they have the capacity? Yes. But that's what's filling our prisons, right? So this incorrect, iniquitous action, it's like they're all part of the club and nobody wants to
Mm.
get their hand slapped for that.
Well,
So
and again, another theme in my book, right? The club is the Gadiantons. It's these secret combinations, and secret combinations go hand in hand with Satan, with the Church of Satan, and like a literal like religion of Satan. And that always goes hand in hand with the enslavement of others, particularly women and children. It just does.
yeah,
If you have secret combinations, women and children are going to be the ones that are targeted.
yeah,
And I believe that's why, and again, I take chapters to discuss this. We have this pattern throughout the Book of Mormon. We have the pattern where when you start messing with the temple, when you start messing with that doctrine of the nature of God, what God really is, which is a Elohim, a man and a woman in union, and their son, Jesus Christ, and I would say their daughter as well. But when you mess with that, inevitably, you're going to mess with the role of women. You're going to
yes,
denigrate women. And that is the pattern that we were given way back since before Lehi. It's there in texts that were hidden, and they talk about this. You mess with the temple, the role of women, and wealth. Wealth is
yeah.
always a part of that. Now, we're very familiar with wealth being a part of the pride cycle, but what we fail to see because we are blind and we don't see the woman is we don't see that it's not just about the wealth, it's about the divine feminine. It's about the temple and the divine feminine. And then wealth is just a part of that, right?
The beautiful part of this is in it's a great study is really to go through Proverbs, and I've outlined kind of there's a law of the mother that is all about righteousness, morality, and all of these things. And she's talking to her sons and she calls them, "You're sleeping, you sluggards, like wake up." She says, but because she has so many gifts to give, that they actually can have bounty and beautiful gifts if their mind is correct, right? There are beautiful gifts that can be had, but it has to be in righteousness. If they're not, then they're on that black square instead of on the white square. But that's one of the things that's so wonderful is a lot of the evidences that are being brought forward are like scriptures from the Nag Hammadi found in Egypt or the Dead Sea Scrolls or and then you find out, wait a minute, that's not the way they're teaching us today. What was different? What were they changing? Or the lead plates, that were found in Jordan. So that's where we can find some of these things. But I'll just go back to DC for a second here. Let me
Yeah.
see. Okay, but it all comes back to what you were saying. If we realize that the image of God is man and woman, Elohim, versus the problem actually is they got rid of the woman and they put in a bird. And they say it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And by doing so, is creation really two men and a bird? No, it's really a man and a woman. So everything about this earth, all the laws, all the science, everything testifies that life comes through the female. Everything is male, female, right? And
Mhm.
so in this picture, I love it too because her eyes are open. He loves her, right? He wants to hold her, but his eyes are still closed.
Mhm.
She's the one that is going to have that sight and bring this forward. But until the 20th century, women were not in a place that they could have the
Yeah.
opportunities to bring this forward.
Yeah. And I will just interject, I guess, a little, I don't know, invitation to women that with this newfound freedom, what are we doing with it? Are we using it wisely or are we using it to step into a masculine role and produce and consume and all these things or sometimes I've seen a lot of women who use that power very unrighteously. It's like we have been oppressed for so long. I think there's a lot of trauma and wounding and there's some lashing back now at men from women and understandably so, but that needs to heal because the power that women have is not a masculine power. It is so much more. It is
It's
so beyond that. It is so much more powerful. And if women can wake up to that and realize that we are so much more powerful than earning money or being physically strong or, being able to compete in sports or the workplace or whatever, like our power goes way beyond that. Once women wake up to that and, like you said, step into the power that the freedom that we do have finally in this
yeah.
for the first time in history, we will have Zion. We will bring in the millennial day. We will be unstoppable.
And that's the third class that I was telling you about is
Yeah.
really the path of transformation. First, she had to at least wake up and realize, oh, there's more to this life. There's more. And then getting out of her anger and wrath because
Hmm.
the minions, the little voices that say, who do you think you are to imagine something more? Or where do you think you're going? They will nag at her and try and keep her. Or the opposite of is get you pissed off and
Yeah.
angry. And so either side of those things, either being so beaten down or so pissed off, you are not in a place where you can receive the revelation that you need to fill the purpose of your creation. Like what you're a creator. You're going to be making something. You're going to be doing something. You're going to be uplifting. I don't know what it is, but you will know what it is, right? As it's
Hmm.
come before you. So I agree. I think Satan kind of made everybody so pissed, or, it's just finally women were waking up and being able to breathe a second. But
Yeah.
then you have women that are now CEOs or attorneys at the top and all the rest of it and saying, well, but is this what it's all about?
Hmm.
Right? Because her core is this nurturer. And so to have a family, to have a child, those are such blessings, but we've been beaten down because of it. And so, it's this beautiful balance that we have to walk and find our path in. But anyway, finding the woman and realizing she's part of deity is really important. So that's part of this unveiling her, right? First, you have to know she even is there. And then you start your journey of this ascent. And here you have Jacob and the story of Jacob's ladder before he receives his new name as Israel. And we think of the 12 sons of Israel and Israel over as a country. But it's really the name Israel are those that conquer with God. They realize and they rely on. But in this journey, you can see there's female angels, right, that are going up this path through the stars and up to the sun. There's little children that lead them, She has, all sorts of the bread, the water, the children. It's it's his ascension vision that he's having, but we also need to understand how that works for the women. Oh, this is going to be part of this is what I'm doing. It's the Jacob's ladder transforms him. This is a piece of art. I kind of want to skip that because that's what I'm going to be unveiling a little bit. But
Oh yeah, don't give it all away, huh?
yeah, I had that created for me. And anyway, but it's the journey and how you get out of the cavern, how you get out of the darkness and start moving forward. And that's where Joel says, what is it? Blow your trumpets. The bridegroom will come forth out of his chamber and the bride out of her closet. So she has been hidden, and it doesn't mean the church has been hidden in a closet, right? They've taken for themselves the name that the bride is the church. But if she needs to come out of her closet, the church isn't any churches. Where have they been hiding in a closet? They've never been hiding in a closet. They have hidden her in a closet. But the bridegroom and the bride, right? Christ being referred to as the bridegroom shows you the importance that a bride in his own name. And the bridal chamber was anciently the Holy of Holies. It's the place where the covenant is made, the Ark of the Covenant. In fact, when you think of the New Testament and the Old Testament, the word's not testament, it's covenant.
Mhm.
The new covenant and the old covenant all have to do with the covenant of creation, the covenant of marriage. So our eyes are so far afield from that. But as you go back and you put her back in her place and you realize what did um, what did Adam, after she's separated from Adam, and there are two separations, the Lord gives, it's like a one-liner, but it is the solution. And he says, therefore, Adam, now that you're separated, you will be a lone man. You're separated. Therefore, you need to cleave unto Eve. That cleaving is directional. He has to go and find her and to cleave to her in a marriage covenant that he will never leave her. He will always protect her. He will always love her. And when they asked Jesus Christ and they said, well, what about, if you want to put your wife aside or all the rest of it? And he said, wait, no, in the beginning, it was never so.
Mhm.
The man was to cleave to his wife. So because of your iniquities, I have given you this situation, but you have to give her a bill of divorcement. You can't just keep her in hide her away and have another wife and another wife. No, no, no. She has to be free. But later on, he's asked and he said, did God ever give his wife a bill of divorcement? No. God's still married. God
Mhm.
still has the mother and the father and this creation model for us, but it's so broken in this world. How are we going to get it? Well, you have to awaken the women, heal the women, and then you can start to heal the men. But I think it really falls on the women first to have this understanding. Because even as much as I've taught this and I've shared this with men, I would say there is a handful, and I really can think of maybe three that
Mhm.
understand it. And the only reason they understand it is they have had a personal spiritual experience with the mother. But others who get it through scriptures, they kind of get a sense of it, but
Mhm.
it's not. So maybe we'll get there, but I think definitely the women have the power because men love women. and they want to be with women and they desire to be with the woman. And so she's the one that can set the standard or set the stage, but she has to be able to honor herself, and not in a snooty, crappy, yucky way, but just in an honoring, right? She won't let others, she'll take herself out of harm. I mean, if she's captured or enslaved or something like that, right? But for the most part, we have women that have just succumbed to the traditions of the world and thought, well, I guess that's as good as it gets. But there are men that will step up and honor their wife and bride, and those are really great guys, and they need our love and support. And because as we lift them up and as they lift us up, it's this beautiful kind of formula.
Yeah, and I've had some conversations like that before, with some of the other guests on here of, I've had that experience myself, and for me it looks like healing. As I heal, right, heal that woundedness, heal whatever it is, women, it all goes through our bodies and we experience autoimmune things and just so in pain and all of that. But as I healed, part of that healing was there was this awakening. There was this being open to the mother, which was very unexpected for me. And as I went through this process, my family saw it, my husband saw it, and it was a little disorienting for him at first. It is a little disconcerting. It's not what they're used to. It may, you've got that masculine that feels a little bit even threatened at times because it's like, well, no, we have this masculine church. This is what's right. And it's like, well, it is right, but it's just that there's more.
Hmm.
And I remember, speaking to this dynamic one time, a friend texted my husband a screenshot of something I had posted. Like,
Yeah.
not no words, just kind of showing, hey, your wife's going off the deep end. And my husband's hackles get kind of raised. And I share this in my book. But he doesn't exactly know how to respond because he's not fully certain about this whole Heavenly Mother stuff. I mean, he's gotten a lot. He's seen the good fruits. It makes sense, but there's just something that just for him he was still a little bit reticent. And so he'd been praying, and finally he prays about it one more time in light of this scenario, and he just gets this answer, like just as clear as day, that the woman thou gavest me and commanded that she should remain with me, she gave me the fruit, and I did partake. And he realized, and it was good fruit and it was good. And after that, it was like he just accepted. And boy, he just opened up. And my husband's always been a very sensitive spiritual guy, but it's like things just opened up. He started getting like more prophetic dreams and more, just lots of things because it was like, okay, I accept this. I want this fruit. And you'll get it immediately as soon as you're like, yes, this is what I want.
Oh, that is so good. And as you look at the medical symbol of the two serpents around the rod, the
Mm-hmm.
middle,
Mm-hmm.
it really is the idea of us coming together as the masculine and the feminine. And then a lot of times it has the wings, right? The healing in the wings. And that's the beauty and the power of of somebody that's looking for that divine masculine and divine feminine. They're trying to be, we're not perfect. We're not going to be perfect. God doesn't expect this type of perfection, but an awakening, our eyes open. I think he was healing the blind that can't see. They have eyes but don't see, and the ears and they don't hear. They're not receiving the kind of the spiritual input. And once we accept, I mean, really through school and everything else, it's just like, no, everything God isn't here. But there's a spiritual connection. You're more than just a clump of cells. And so this beautiful coming together can be so powerful and so healing. That I think is kind of the sacred union of the two coming together and healing one another, because then you aren't so critical of him because he doesn't get you, you get you. And so now it's like, okay, I see how this works, and I can have more charity and I can have more love and compassion for everybody because we're all in this kind of muddy mess. And
Mhm.
we're just trying to awaken to a solution. And I really feel like the woman is this solution.
She is. Do you think that's what the founding fathers were trying to convey? I think maybe
Yes.
these aren't the same slides that I saw the other day, but were they trying to convey that? Do you think they were trying to? I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
Because when you go there, this one, the end time scenario is the woman comes out of the wilderness, kind of goes with your book, right?
yeah.
And when she returns, she, with her son and those that have a testimony of Jesus Christ, they crush the head of the serpent. They are different ones. I had a different one with that same Constitution on it, or the Congressional building, but they did. And so they literally have built Washington, D.C., that when it will be restored, we have the obelisk, which is the George Washington, the obelisk. And on top of it, it says Leo Deus, Leo Dio, or um, holiness to God, or God is great, and it's up on the very top. So when the sun rises on that equinox, there is nothing taller than that tip of the point. And so that's why really Washington, D.C. is a small city where New York is a very tall city. Nothing could be built higher than George Washington's obelisk.
Mhm.
And anyway, the alignment of the stars, the way that I mean, they had their temple teachings, and it was about teaching righteousness and how the men needed to do a little more work than the women to get up to the level of the women's righteousness. But these women taught their sons, and these sons became our founding fathers. And it goes way back, all the way over. And I think out of southern France is where we see kind of this reemergence of what I would call the gospel of love,
Mhm.
and that gospel that's not just of laws that you are critical of a person, but honors that there is something divine within a man and a woman. So, like to go and see how the entire city is set up. Gosh, I don't have the architecture. If you can see this one in the book,
Oh,
it's
do you want to stop sharing your screen and then we'll see that a little better? Or maybe I
yeah,
can
let's
even
do
do it.
that. And let's see if we can make that
Yeah.
bigger. Okay, here's one of them. It's the
Okay.
secret architecture of the nation's capital.
Hmm.
And that one, he's done a really good job, but because he doesn't have the understanding of kind of temple and going back into the temple, he can see the alignment. He realizes that there's something that needs to be unveiled with the woman because the architecture so much has the women all over in it. I'm trying to find maybe one that shows it's the stars. And so people they think, oh, it must be some kind of devil worship or something. But the Statue of Liberty is literally for our liberty, and that comes to us from France, right?
Yeah.
And that goes if you follow Fifth Avenue all the way down, there's like three major obelisks that will point you directly to the Statue of Liberty, which is like they're trying to tell you this woman has something to do with our fullness, our liberty, our agency. She's part of
Yeah.
the picture.
Well, and
And
people don't understand because they look at like something like a star that is in the shape of a pentagram, and that is has everything to do with Venus and the divine feminine, right?
yes,
But they think, oh, this is satanic or it is Freemasonry, and Freemasonry is bad, and these guys were Freemasons. So they look at all this divine feminine imagery or all these beautiful things that you've pulled out from your visits there, and they're like, oh, that's just all this like secret combination bad stuff.
yeah,
But I think what people, I don't know, do you want to address that a little bit since that's probably in the
sure.
back of some people's minds?
Yeah, I know. But here's a good picture I have of
Oh, yeah, let's see it.
this one. I don't know if you can see that's the original map of Washington, D.C.
Uh-huh, the
in the
cube.
cube.
Yeah.
Later
Yeah.
on, Virginia will take back some of their land, so it doesn't look that way entirely. There is this wonderful, it's the George Washington Masonic National Memorial, and it's in Alexandria. So when you think of Alexandria, Egypt, there was the lighthouse of Alexander. And that lighthouse on the top, it had fire. Well, it's also symbolic of a temple where when you get to the tower, the high tower,
Mm-hmm.
like when we think of Mary Magdalene, the Tower Woman,
Mm-hmm.
there is this enlightenment. And so you have the light on the tower. Well, this is built at the end. I'll show you a picture of it. This is built at the end of King Street. Can you see that building? And it has all those different layers going up, up, up. And at the fifth, I think it's the fifth layer, is where marriages can take place.
Yeah.
And inside, it looks like the Knights Templar. It's all with the slate on the ground and
Mm.
armor and stuff like that. And so then you go up to the next level and the doors open up and you can walk around it and you can look out. And the concept or what's being presented to you is you gain vision. After your marriage, a holy union, a man gains vision and he
Yeah.
can see. Before that, I would say those people that are just saying, oh, it's evil and it's terrible, hold up a mirror and look at your heart. What are you doing? How are you thinking? Where is your mind? The woman's also called the mirror. That was one of her symbols or one of her titles. She holds it up so that the man can look at his a lot of the things that the men do as projection on the woman. You see it
Mm.
when a man's having an affair. You're having an affair. You're talking to other men. You're doing well, it's a mirror to them. What are they doing? Right. And so I think when we see people that are just all they can see is evil and darkness and it must be something demonic, it's like, well, what are you doing in your life that's making you think everything's evil? Let's seek for the good and find those things. And so what you find is this is up on a mountain and it's up on the mount and it's the end of King Street where you will be anointed a king, but
Mm.
a king with his queen, right? You can't be a king without your queen. And they have the lights are literally up here and the levels that go up, it never ends. It's like when we die, we will go, but there's always more that we will do. And the same, you will think, oh, I've learned all there is to learn. And then a whole nother area opens up for ourselves, right? It's like, oh my goodness, I thought I was getting end, like Mandy Green, pulling this string, and all these patterns, and there's more and there's more. It is so big. And that's why I thought if I could put these 4 classes and just consolidate that information of just, does she exist? What are her names? What's my path of transformation? So that I start to receive my personal revelation, then the Lord's going to lead you where you need to go. Then you will have understanding. And then with your eyes open and starting to see some of these symbols and things, you'll see them for yourself. So when I found that Octagon over in Europe and I came back and I found the Octagon house and I went in it and I thought, this is interesting. It was owned by a doctor and turns out he was the architect for the Capitol. And I thought, he's a medical doctor. They've had architects since the time of Julius Caesar. Why would you have a doctor be the architect? It doesn't make any sense. But then I realized as I went through the house in the Octagon, it's full of all the symbolism of ascending the staircase, and going before the presence of the Lord. It had the female, it has, and so the Octagon, the 8, just represents a time of change when you are being changed, like at 8 years old, or they're circumcised at 8, or baptized at 8, or there's renewal, resurrection, all the RE kind of words are the octagon represents that. And if you think of a square on top of a square, that also creates this 8-sided figure, which is the seal of Melchizedek.
Hmm.
You have lots of things that are in one form. And it turns out that the architects of America will buy that building and then they build their architectural school next to it. And I thought, who in that architectural group knew how important this building is? And it's little, you would walk by it and not even, because it doesn't look grand. It looks really unimportant. But after the War of 1812, when the British came back and they burned the Capitol, they literally set up the presidency and they signed the peace agreement of 1812 in that little room in the middle of the Octagon, right? It's a renewal. So there is just a treasure trove of things. And when people think it's evil, I just am like, well, do you really think George Washington and Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, do you think they're evil? They are not evil. They sacrificed everything, their lives, their sacred fortune. They wanted this land to be for liberty. And it turns out this land was known about even before Christopher Columbus by Templars.
Mhm.
And they kept it sacred and they kept it secret. And we would not have, I mean, when you really think about it, could a little band of some, frontier soldiers with some bullets and gun defeated the armada of the greatest nation of earth, which was England? No, we couldn't have done it. But it was their brothers that had the similar mindset that knew this land was supposed to be for freedom, that gave them out of Spain and France and England, giving us money. Is it crazy to pay Napoleon for the land, the Louisiana Purchase? That's how we get the most of our land. Just think of this. England is in a war with France. They're fighting Napoleon, right? They're in a war. And they give us the millions of dollars so that we will give that millions of dollars to Napoleon so that we can buy the land. Why would you give basically your enemy money who
Mhm.
you're fighting? Doesn't make any sense. But the men that they went to were men that knew this land was so sacred that it had to be restored. So they did it against their own best interest. So people don't understand that kind of hidden part of the history and how there was this group of men and women that longed for Zion to be reestablished in a land where the church and the state could not control humanity, where the dignity of a man and a woman, that they could vote, they could, most being God-fearing, right, will make the righteous vote. And that was the way. They knew that there, I mean, when you think of the second coming, it says it will be terrible and great. So it's not going to be easy, but it's also going to be great because eventually Christ wins, God wins, and we end up in this millennial time of peace. So all the evidence is actually in our scriptures. It's actually in our history. It's laid out in the architecture of Europe. I mean, it's just incredible. You see the same alignment that we have in Washington, D.C., you see in Paris.
Mhm.
So the Arc de Triomphe, there are four of them, and they go along the Champs-Élysées. That Champs-Élysées represents the going to the illusion field or where warriors go. It's on the Equinox, and the castle, you would say, would be like the Louvre. It's this beautiful place, and there's a garden in front of it. And so the whole idea, and then you have another alignment, which is on the other, okay, so that you have the equinox and then you have the solstice. The solstice goes from the Madeleine Cathedral,
Mhm.
right? So it's from
Mhm.
from Mary,
Magdalene,
goes
yeah.
across the Rose Line through Saint Sulpice, which is one of the most esoteric of all of their cathedrals, into Marie de Medici's. It's the garden, and in her garden, it's all women. It's all about the women
Mhm.
and these women that have been the keepers of wisdom and taught their children. So we can't just think of the men. It's not the men that are keeping these secrets. The women also have been the ones that have passed down this information generation to generation, but not boldly, not against the church, not against their government, but knowing the time would come where if you live that way, you're blessed, but eventually the world will be blessed. So you can find it. I mean, that same pattern shows up in Barcelona. It shows up. I mean, it's just, I take my little compass and my, things. I find it Chaco Canyon. I found it Machu Picchu. It's like, how did these ancient temples? I found it. I did an incredible one over in Hawaii, finding their ancient temples that are built like Egyptian temples.
Wow.
Absolutely mind-blowing. And so when you find this stuff of the ancient temples and you understand what they were trying to do was build the Eden. They were trying to get back to that Edenic garden And it has to do with marriage, the husband and the wife coming back together and bringing forth these heavenly spirits to earth so that they can make the most out of their lives. And we get so twisted down here. There's so many different directions you can go, but there is like a line of truth. And I think it will become more evident with authors like you and hopefully
Yeah.
people that are
And
researching
and
this
I
stuff.
think that's like we said, to fill the measure of our creation as women at this time, um, we need to step up. The founding fathers, I think, did do things intentionally, and I know that people can find on your site and stuff that will go into that more. Sorry, my microphone's being a little weird now, I think. But the founding fathers set up what they could. And I know they weren't perfect at it. I mean, I'm sure they were misogynists and they probably, didn't think women should vote or whatever. I mean, they probably, some of them may have, I don't know. But they set up what they could because they understood, like you said, we need freedom. We
Mm.
need that power, right, of that coming together of the masculine and feminine, which is freedom from the oppression and the tyranny that was the religion of the day, that was the government, that were these secret combinations. They try to set up this system of government with checks and balances as much as possible to sustain that freedom. And I think maybe they didn't even realize, maybe they did, but it was so that at some point women could step up and
Oh yeah.
fulfill that role, right, of the divine feminine, to
Yeah.
step into our divine feminine and complete that picture, complete the work that they
Yeah.
set up.
One of the pictures that I don't have here for you, which is it's literally called The Unveiling of Wisdom. And
Oh,
they show how she had been unveiled in other nations, but she would eventually been unveiled in the United States. And it shows her as she's taking off her veil, and her two little children are by her feet, and we will know her. So they really did know that the sculpture, the architecture is just filled with divine women and heroic men because it takes the heroic man to protect the divine woman, right? They have to keep her. But I think the Lord foresaw that power goes to where the money and power is. And so we are seeing probably right now the most demonic effort to control speech and to stop your voice or your vote or all of these things. And
or control our
everybody,
bodies.
yeah, to your bodies that you
Yeah.
are commanded to put things in your bodies that you should not be able to take over the sovereignty of a person's body in
Yes.
any way, right? And so they knew those things would come, but I'm hoping that we will have some of these um, temple nights. It's interesting. I'll give you one more that's kind of interesting. The Union Building, where the trains come in and out of Washington, D.C., and it's a beautiful building. But inside of it, it's also set up as a temple with an east and a west. And in the west, there's a small room with it's kind of doors and sacred space. And then on either side, it has stairways that go up. So does that building that I showed you at the end of the King's Hill. It has spiral staircases on both sides. Anyway, but in that one, I'm sorry, I'm probably taking too long. You might have to edit out a bunch, but um, in that building, there are 40 mighty men, and they're like these 15-foot statues. They're massive. And I have asked people that have lived in Washington, D.C., like, have you seen the 40 mighty men in at Union Station? And they're like, no. No one has ever seen them. But when you walk in, if you go into the very center of this busy, train, people are coming in and out, but it's a gorgeous building, and look up, around the outside of it are these 40, and they're massive statues. But the idea that it takes mighty men to protect this this governance because Satan, those that will want to control it, will go in, and it's through their lying, cheating, immoral behavior, immoral actions, right? It's truly the worst of the worst is what we are seeing. And you can only pray. It's like, okay, if we are that close, are they going to be able to clean it up? Is something miraculous going to happen? I hope, we can just keep praying, but it is a wonderful place to go and explore. So I am going to take a group out. I think it will be the first or second, probably the second week in April. I'm looking at where the spring break, people's schedules. I want to get it on just on the outside of that window so you aren't totally trounced by all the other spring breakers. But there's also the Blossom Festival, and it's just super cool to ride your bike around and then see these places because they are
Oh,
a big
yeah.
distance, hard to walk at all, but great.
Yeah, well, I am down for that. We'll see if you're doing that. I'm excited. So send us the links to, any of that, any more information on this so that I can put that below.
Okay.
Because I know you just have so much, but I would love to do a tour like that with you. I think that would be so fun. And
Oh, it'll blow your mind.
oh,
And you'll,
I
oh my
bet, I
gosh, they
bet.
knew so much.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of this and giving us some of the beauty that is also a part of the Enlightenment and the founding of this nation and the vision for what can happen, what is to come if we have the courage really to wake up, to let go, repent and heal and embrace the mother in that
Yeah.
way.
Oh,
Yeah.
so good. It's so
Yeah.
good, Jacqueline. You're doing such good work.
Oh, thank you, as are you. Thank you, Robin.